change is the only constant. Having that right kind of mindset, questioning about the things, what you can influence, what you can't. You need to make the right kind of choices.
It's not about what you say at the end, it's about how you say it. All right. Hello and welcome to Your Brand, Your Business, the show where we dive into stories and strategies behind building a standout brand. I'm Marie Zemetsnikova, your host, and today I'm excited to introduce our guest, Horst Gallo, who will be sharing his expertise on authentic collaboration. Horst, thank you so much for joining us. And can you please introduce yourself briefly to our audience, who you are and what is it that you actually do?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Marie. This is great to be here today. So I, I fell into HR like 25 or so years ago. I'm German originally, moved in every 2 or 3 years actually across the globe. I was working and living in Europe, Asia, and the US, where I am currently, with a lot of snow. I was in corporate America for 20 or so years, working with IBM or Orion Innovation as chief people officer and senior leader. And then the last 3 years, I actually followed a bit more what I'm passionate about, working on the edge of people and technology. And I'm an advisor for several startups in the environment, and I'm an investor. And I do a bit of consulting on the side in the space of leadership, culture, and organizational design. That's me.
Nice. And what do you usually look for? Because you said that you are investor, you do also in a startup environment. So when you have this experience, what is the thing that you usually look when it comes to startups? Like the one thing that you really like to see in the startup when investing?
Yeah, so it's always a bit of a combination. I think for me, one of the most important things actually is the connection to the leadership team, to the founder, to the team who is actually doing that together, of course, with the idea and the business impact that can actually have around that. I very often, most of the time, actually fall into the space of people technology. Because that's what I have was been working in the last few years, and of course I can add value not only on product, but also, of course, on go to market and how to position it with enterprises and how you can grow and scale a company overall around that. But I think the most important thing for me is always the founder, the leadership team, and the ideas and passion actually behind that.
Mhm. Can you just explain what is PeopleTech for people who might not know this phrase?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that is actually an official kind of term around that, but it's basically technology in the HR kind of area, which helps with this new ways of working in the broadest kind of sense around that. It's really helping not only HR teams, but actually people teams across the board and management with some of the areas around that.
Mhm. And what role people systems play in fostering leadership development and aligning organizational culture with business goals, for example?
So I think that this whole notion of people system is for me a very, very important one because, of course, um, anything what you do needs to be a surrounded system, an ecosystem around that, not just actually one thing off around that. If I start off, so coaching is one of the things, of course, which helps a lot of leaders around that. It helps them creating self-awareness. Helps them with with emotional intelligence, which in today's world, the soft skills in the past actually are becoming the power skills, especially in the area of HR. That needs to happen, and of course, all of these things are essential for collaboration. In today's world, for me, servant leadership, if you have heard that term, is for me the new style of leadership because it's really about not this top-down kind of event, but actually helping us in this area of agile and design thinking around that. And for me, people systems like feedback loops, like recognition, that you actually talk about the things actually what you're expecting, leadership training, and so they align behavior to company values. And the structured system ensure collaboration isn't just a buzzword, but a sustained practice because it is incentivizing, of course, the right kind of behaviors. Often, when you look at some of the companies, they have their values on the wall, but they're not living it. But their people systems can actually really bring that to life overall.
Mm. That's really true. I collaborated in the past, or I was part even of some companies that they had written their values on the wall, but then it was like when you were living inside that company for some time, you were like, yeah, but there is something off because it doesn't align with my experience being, for example, a freelancer for that company or like collaborating with them. So it's really interesting how values works actually in the reality. And you mentioned a lot about collaboration and
Mhm.
authentic collaboration. So, what is exactly authentic collaboration? Because a lot of creators on platforms and in companies they call for collaboration with others, but authentic collaboration, what is it?
Yeah, so I think maybe people have different kind of perceptions around it or definitions. For me, it's really so true collaboration is building on trust, transparency, and shared purpose. I think that for me is the starting point around that. It's not just working together, but it's actually co-creating solutions with mutual respect. That you really have that part, and everybody is is equal around it. And of course, one of the things what is absolutely required there is psychological safety, where people actually feel safe to share ideas, to challenge each other, to challenge the thinking, not just top down, but actually bottom up. That's the part where you can really then collaborate, and that fosters innovation, and that fosters this growth mindset around that. That for me is actually the connection across that.
Mm. I really like that what you said, that it's the environment where everybody feels safe to, for example, speak up their opinions, to collaborate, to actually speak up their ideas. This is also going really nicely hand by hand with the diversity that actually like working in the diverse fields with diverse people. You need to have open communication. You need to be also up for example having tough discussions. One
Hmm.
time I spoke with a girl who worked in Apple, and when I asked her what were the experience from Apple that she brought into her business, she told me that it was to have the tough discussion, that
Hmm.
the Apple is actually innovative because nobody fears the tough discussion. But for example, here in Europe, we might see that we are avoiding it, that we rather like go with the culture that it's set in the company, that nobody wants to take the responsibility. So what would you advise to, for example, companies or to small medium businesses who wants to start to have the tough discussions, they want to enforce the trust, transparency, what you just mentioned about authentic collaboration? So what would you advise them to start this so that we can move forward and not just
Yes.
comfortably around?
Yes, I think that there's no silver bullet. I think it's not like this one thing you do and there's something else. Because of course, Apple, as an example, when you look at this, Steve Jobs was famous for having this triads and this shouting kind of arguments about that. Not just actually shouting himself, but also, of course, actually getting it. And this is really an important one. But I think it always starts, of course, actually with this psychological safetiness. Because um, if you want to create innovation, you need to try things. And when you try things and you try really hard and you try different things, you fail. And failure, of course, is an important thing which you need to accept. If you're not accepting failure, then people will not try the best things what they can do. They will always play it safe. And
Mm.
playing safe actually will not get you actually to innovation around that. So that kind of environment is really for me an important one. And I think what you also see is that collaboration is needed. It's not just working in silos, but actually working across boundaries, working across functions. That I think is where startups actually thrive very often, because they don't have very, very big teams. So they need to work actually across the board. And therefore, of course, the outcomes actually very often are better.
Mm.
But for me, the other part is really then to create this collaborative, the flywheel. When you have clear expectations around that, when you provide feedback to people actually what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and you allow them as well to do that. When you recognize, of course, also what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, not just again have it on the wall, but actually really putting that into the systems, compensating, rewarding around that. That all actually will provide that environment around it. And as you said, I mean, it's all about different perspective. And it's not just about having a tick mark in one of these categories, what we're actually talking. And I think we in the last years, we were maybe not necessarily doing it very well when it comes to diversity. It needs to be a natural kind of part, it needs to be ingrained in everything what we do, not an afterthought. If
Mm.
you do that from an overall perspective, you can get to that point. It is such an important aspect to have the different points of view. And I have plenty examples because, of course, I was very often actually the only foreigner in the places where I was living. I remember China. You have to get into this part and actually look at that.
Mm. So this is also a reminder for all of you who are currently watching and listening, just fail as much as possible, because this is where you are actually enforcing the diversity and also authentic collaboration, but then learn from it. This is also important to put it in the collaboration wheel, that you put it back in the system and that you don't just close the door after you fail. So I think that you said it perfectly, and it's really important to then also enforce it in the system, to learn from your experiences and try it again. So like, what did I fail and how can I do it different, and not just to get back to the normal and stop pushing, because this is not how Steve Jobs did it, for sure.
No, he was very deliberate in many of the things around that. But of course, it's also, of course, you have to be getting a thick skin for that, because it's not nice to hear, of course, that actually you failed, that you actually messed up. But if you have that in the right kind of mindset about growth, then I think you can actually learn from that. And this is this intention, which is also so important. There's many people actually writing books now about this intentionality around that. And I think if you're providing feedback, tough love, sometimes you call it, with the right intention, that actually helps the person. And it's exactly what you said. Try to fail, not try to fail. Ideally, to not fail, but actually, when you fail, try to learn, but actually give or take the risk, because this is an important one if you want to be innovative.
And is this a responsibility of a leader to actually enforce this culture inside the company? Or because not everybody might have this emotional intelligence sometimes to, for example, recognize that some people are more social? I know that it's also a skill that you can learn, but is there, for example, some position that you can hire into your organization, into your company, that will actually be there for you to enforce this change management, or to be sure that all of the aspects are taken into consideration inside the system?
I think enforce is probably the wrong word. I think enable is probably a better, because you don't enforce collaboration. You don't, because it's not working. But I think if a leader creates that environment where this psychological safety is there, where there's clear expectations, where there's where he or she models this collaborative behavior as a leader, where you foster open communication, you encourage feedback, not just top down, but actually all the way up, and maybe having 360. And you as a leader go out on a regular basis and actually say, hey, look, I'm trying to do this better. How am I doing? Am I succeeding? Am I not? What can I do better? This is really, really important around that. And I think the other thing is, leaders also need to force, and this is where the enforcement may come in, for cross-functional projects, because we all tend to work with the people actually we know and we like. But actually, if you're in HR, you don't like to work with finance, but there is a lot of value actually when you work across some of the areas. So fostering this collaboration, this cross-functional projects to break down silos and build this shared vision, I think is a really important one. And then it gets back to rewarding and recognizing and paying for the efforts what you expect, because very often actually we do performance management, and the things what we actually paid and for or reward later on has nothing to do actually what we actually want in this kind of part. So it's creating this environment um, to really do the things actually what you want them to do. And it's the leader has a big role in to play in this one.
And is there a way, how can I prepare for this, or like how can I upskill myself as a solopreneur? Because I mean, not a lot of people are just Steve Jobs with the whole army of programmers behind and designers, etc. And people usually start small. But can I, for example, myself as a solopreneur, prepare for example, delegation of the tasks, and slowly but surely becoming the leader? What are the practices that I can start small, for example, enforcing in our team. And usually, for example, myself, I'm outsourcing, but I want to also enable this kind of culture of the change, that we are really progressive, that we want to innovate, that the people can share who are working in, for example, my company, that they can share what they think, that I'm fine with this feedback, that it's not only like that it's not only that I'm just giving the tasks and you should complete it, but
Yes.
how to actually foster this collaboration when it comes to outsourcing, because we are also changing currently the work, how we are actually working. It's like a lot of corporations, they are decreasing the number of employees, and they are turning more into externals. So like how you can do this in the post-COVID times of work, I would say.
So that's a huge question. I think
Yes.
when you start when you start off, of course, there's always good and bad things as well around that, because if you're a solopreneur, you have a lot of strengths. Otherwise, you would not be in that position. You have a lot of grit. You work things. Delegation is not necessarily one of them in the beginning. So it's all about um, growing as a person and growing as a leader into different kind of a position. And very often we have seen actually in the startup environment that some of the founders at one point are not able to scale to the next kind of level because the company has outgrown them, and they need more professional kind of manager around that. And I think for me, what is important is actually that leaders, founders, anybody actually around that have this self-awareness, what they are good at, what they're not good at, what they can do, what I can change. And I think it starts a lot with growth mindset. Growth mindset meaning that you really are try to open to learn every day, not to think that you know everything, that you're the best in the room, but actually to learn every single day from each of the conversations around that. And when you have that open kind of mindset, a lot of the things actually fall into place, because then you ask more questions than actually you say. Then you make less decisions, but you ask again, and you work with the team in some of the areas around that. And as of course the company actually is growing, you can put processes in place. And I say processes in a very delicate way, because processes are not often in the startup environment actually very good. But I think you need to have an environment which is reinforcing what you're trying to do, by creating that clarity, by giving that feedback around that. So by everybody talking around that, by being that environment where you have different perspectives actually to the table. But then you also later on you're rewarding the things actually what is there. So all of this actually fit together. And but it starts for me actually always with growth mindset, because when you have that, you're trying to learn every day, and then you come to the table with this environment.
Mm. I really like what you said, that sometimes the founders and the leaders, that they are overgrown by the company, and that you just need to be sober and humble about what you are exactly
Yes.
doing and what is actually good for your company. That you just didn't. We have an expression in Czech that you just should not like feel that you ate the whole world, that there
Mhm.
are people who are just like smarter in different aspects. This is why you are, for example, outsourcing. This is why you have employees, because
Yes.
you just cannot have all of the skills of the world, and you should be sober in these senses. So I think this was a really good answer that you provided. And I would just like to go back a bit to you, because I'm curious what inspired your belief that authentic collaboration is key to unlocking an organization's full potential. So, where this all started when it comes to the authentic collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's when I think back, I've now worked 20 something years or so in big kind of companies around that. Maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, a lot more with startup. But my experience actually, no matter if it is big enterprises or if it is startups, was always where that collaboration accelerates innovation. And ideally, of course, collaboration across diverse kind of teams around it, different perspectives, not just man, woman, not just different races, different kind of ways of thinking. I think is a really important kind of aspect around that, and that I think accelerates, of course, risk taking, what we talked about before, and therefore, of course, then also innovation. And the other part for me is I've always seen when people stayed in silos and there's maybe misalignment, that slows down growth and it slows down engagement because people are not going to be open enough. They feel like they're fighting against each other instead of actually collaborating actually across the board.
Mhm.
So I realized that the best performing teams, what I've seen actually across the board, was always where there was not just communication, but if they were connecting at a much deeper level. I don't like calling it family because I don't think that corporate is family because we don't fire people in the family, but we hold people accountable. Absolutely, we do that in all of the areas, and we create friendships. And I think there's a lot of literature now which actually underlines that actually when you have friendships in the office, in that environment around that, you feel stronger, you feel more engaged, you feel like you work longer, kind of not hours, but actually longer in that company around that, and that is all actually reinforcing itself. And I think this whole notion together, when I look at all of that, just says like it is such an important kind of topic around that, and without having that, you're not creating the innovation actually what is needed. And I think the other thing is we talked a bit about having people who are cleverer than you. I think when you're in a room and you're the most clever person, you have the wrong team because you should always be surrounding yourself actually with people who can challenge you, who are maybe better than you, or have a better understanding or different perspective around that. And I remember very often actually when I was going to China the first time, we were coming up with different initiatives because we had to drive some of the areas. And I was always sit back and actually say like, oh my God, what you guys are telling me would never work in Germany, would never work in the US. But of course, I was at that time maybe um, willing enough to learn and actually be convinced. And actually, when we did the initiatives exactly in the way actually that the team actually was describing, it was a huge success. And I was sitting back and saying, wow, I definitely have to learn a lot. And that's what I did over that period of time.
Nice. Yeah, in Asia, everything is upside down. When you arrive, you feel like that you arrived sometimes in different world, which is amazing for open-mindedness, for stretching the brain and the perspective and everything. So this is definitely a school of life. I think that you had as an experience in China. And I really like what you said about that the opposite of collaboration is actually misalignment. That when you feel that you are misaligned with your colleagues at work, that you might feel that the environment is not really open for your perspective, for your opinion, you might feel closed, not really speak up. What would you advise for people who might come across this kind of phenomenon that they really feel misaligned with their colleagues, especially now when the hybrid working, virtual working is a lot of spread. So like lots of companies, they didn't turn back to normal, which means to the office. But how to
Yes.
really tackle the misalignment in the virtual or hybrid environment?
I think often we employees have a lot more influence actually than we think we have. Because of course, I mean, it starts off with alignment actually across the team. And anybody in teams today, when there's at least openness there, you can actually have a conversation and say, hey, let's step back. Let's think about what is really important, what we are trying to achieve. Because when the alignment is there, you can talk about why this is not working. Because then you don't talk about people or you don't talk about you're not doing your job or not, I'm not doing your job, but you can talk about we're not going to achieve this because these things are not happening around that, which makes it, of course, a lot easier around that. And then I think at the end of the day, there's always this kind of wheel. There are certain things you can influence. There are certain things you can't influence. If you try to influence things, but you can't influence because they are either out of your norm, you will always feel unhappy, and it's not going to help you. But if you try to influence the things what you can influence, and then the other part, when you can't influence, you always have a choice to say, I like that, I can stand it, or I cannot. And if you can't, then you need to make a decision around that. But we are not, I think that the good thing is we always have a choice. And the choice maybe is not always the most attractive, but you have a choice. And it is much better to actually make a choice and not staying with that kind of environment what you don't like than actually being unhappy. and getting into this kind of negative modes around it. But I think it always starts off with actually you have a lot more influence actually what you can do. Bring the team together, talk about what you're trying to achieve, and the topics how you can get there. That should always be the first starting point. It's of course complicated because you need to speak up, and not everybody actually has that in their blood. But very often I found is that people are very happy and willing actually to do that, because if you have that feeling, most likely somebody else in the team has exactly the same problem, and then of course you can solve that together.
Mm. I learned along my career that when usually I have some feeling that there is at least one person in my team who has the
Yes,
similar feeling. It's just that we don't feel to speak up because we are
yes,
shy, because we think that the situation will turn against ourselves. So this is definitely something that helped me to speak up, so that it's not it's just getting worse and worse. When it comes to the misalignment, it's always better to just speak face to face about the current situation, really sober, really tell what the situation from your perspective was. It might be also cultural, because if you are working in a
sure,
multicultural environment, it just might be even the language that if you speak with native French and I'm, for example, native Czech, it might just sound different what we are trying to convey as a message. So it's always better to speak face to face about the problem, not hide it or like put it under the carpet. And then, of course, your choice is also to quit. So
yes. And
this is,
and I think it is important that we talk about that, because it's not a forbidden topic. Today there's lots of different choices, and everybody has a choice. It's important, of course, that you can live with the choices, and actually that you try to influence the things what you can influence, and that is certainly one thing what you can influence, where you work.
yes, but a lot of people, for some reason, majority of the people, they feel like in golden cage sometimes, that they are
Hmm,
trapped, that they will not find the same standard what they're used to in somewhere else. So this might be also one of the struggles, that a lot of people just stay where they are to not take the risk. Also, then family happens and things like this. So it might be another influence in your choices. So you always have the choices, but what are the influences of your choices? That's the
sure.
question.
And it's very clear. I mean, I'm not naive. Sometimes decisions are much more hard than it is for some people, because of course everybody has a different life. But of course, there is still an option, of course, actually to make choices and actually to make alignments around that.
Mm. Can you maybe tell us some practical steps on how to start, for example, practical collaboration that is actually useful for the startups? So, like, if I'm a startup, what are the certain steps that I should do to start the practical collaboration, so that actually they are the healthy relationships set from the beginning, and everybody works efficiently, and that there is this like transparency around the management, that the people will not be
Hmm.
scared to come to me with the problems or with the feelings.
Yes, I think actually startups are much more, much more natural anyway, because of some of the things actually what we were talking about, size and so forth. Because if you have a small cross-functional team, they normally solve kind of business challenges around that. But if that is not the case, building, of course, this cycle where you have around that, which is then talking about, of course, clarity, that you have clarity from the very beginning. What do you want to achieve around that?
Mm,
Building processes in place, especially about team working, networking, collaboration around that. But then also, again, getting that feedback mechanism around that. So making sure that you ask the questions, what is working, what is not working. It's, of course, it is needed that you create an environment where everybody feels safe, where they can actually get to the company, not just in a diverse environment, that you show up as your full self, but that it is encouraged that you take risk, and that it is encouraged that actually you fail, because of course if you don't fail, you're not actually creating that innovation around that. So it needs to be there, and probably one of the things actually what I found very useful is actually celebrating failure. because then you can really talk about that and you can talk about the essence of what you were trying to do, the risk you're taking, all of these things around that. And then, of course, having that last part, of course, with rewarding the efforts and the things around it. But being, for example, intentional about inclusion is also an important one, because if you're not intentional, nothing is ever going to change around that.
Mm.
But when you're intentional, when it is part of your network, not an afterthought, but intentional about hiring, thinking about what are the different things actually you want to bring to the table, not gender only, not you name it, but really thinking about it from different kind of perspectives on what you're trying to achieve helps. And then the other thing for me is always as well, this is not static. It has to change. It has to iterate. You have to refine that on a constant basis. Collaboration evolves as the business grows or it shifts. There's so much change happening in today's world. And if you're not actually updating and changing some of the behaviors, that's the same with culture over around that, then of course you're staying static. And at one point, it is not relevant anymore for it today. And that I think is especially for the startup environment. Many startups think too late about the culture, what they are trying to create. It's easy when you have one person, when you hire the second, the third, the fourth, maybe the 10th or the 20th person, you have been the one actually hiring them, knowing exactly what they are. But at one point, that's not the case anymore, because you can't scale a company like that. And then, of course, it is important that you're creating rules which are fulfilling for itself in order to drive that. That all kind of works together.
Nice. I was just when you said that you should celebrate failure. I was just thinking about what was my last failure that I should celebrate, that I forgot to celebrate it, and I think it was that I invested in a software where I wanted to streamline the processes, and I did a mistake that because if you are starting nowadays with a company, with your startup, if you're a solopreneur, even like if you're a normal individual, there is a lot of softwares that you need on daily basis, be it ChatGPT, Riverside, you name it, Microsoft 365.
Yes.
Like the bills are just getting adapt how we are using currently the softwares. And I was amazed by one software which was like scheduler on social media, and I had this kind of really vision how our team will no longer need to, for example, show up every day on social media to actually post something, and
Yes.
they will just be scheduling everything in one day during the week, and it will be much more efficient. And I prepared it for the whole year, even without like trying it full for example, like 7 days. And it was really like more than 600 euros per the year. And I think at the end we just used it like for 1 week, 2 weeks, and we just realized that it's totally useless, that most of our other softwares like CRM is also having this function of scheduling posts, and that
Mm.
actually scheduling of the post on social media is decreasing your engagement. So it was one of the failures that I had to recently, and I was like, since then I actually learned that I will rather pay 3 times for 1 month, which is sometimes like bigger
Hmm.
price. So instead of, for example, 7 euros for 1 month, you pay like 10 euros. But
Hmm.
you just try it for 3 months, paying this bigger price. But after 3 months, you decide if you want to proceed with this software or not. And I no longer
Yes.
go like a really straight ahead with buying software for 1 year. So I should actually celebrate the failure, even though I have maybe a bit of trauma of spending more than 600 euros on something that I didn't use. But at the end, I should celebrate that it didn't happen to
I
me more often.
Well, I think the celebration actually is that you have a realization that instead of, and this is, I think, one of the things many of us actually have, is like we always try to actually do something and then we have it perfect, something big, and it's a big push. But that's not adequate anymore. That's the same when you're actually building a product. You don't want to wait and actually have the perfect product around it. You actually want to go in there, you try something like you try it actually for 1 or 2 months or so, you pay maybe higher, and then you iterate around that, and then you see, is it worth it, is it not? And if it is not worth it, then scrap it, just start with the next one around that. I think it's a very, very good learning around that, and we can use that, the same learning, for many things actually in our life, because coming from HR, we have in the past always had huge projects. We would sit in a dark office. We would lock ourselves away, and then actually we are trying to work for weeks, and then we are ready, and then we roll it out to everybody, and nobody likes it.
Mm.
But it's much better like, to do something small and actually work with the people actually doing that. They like it. We can improve it. We can do something else, and then over time you roll it out, and actually everybody likes it. Much better outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And here we are talking also about innovation, that you are always like
Yes.
upgrading your processes and everything. But what advice would you give to business leader who wants to create a culture that balances innovation, collaboration, and inclusivity? Because it might be really difficult sometimes, like taking into consideration that the startups or the founders usually are in the local region, so for example in Belgium, in Czech Republic, in
Yes.
America, and usually you start with bunch of friends that you know someone, and you usually just outsource or you employ your neighbors, and it might be really difficult to be inclusive from the day number one, like to have diversity of the team, and also be innovative, and at the same time collaborate with other creators, with other startups, etc. Especially if there is language barrier. I found, for example, from the language, like if you are not English, Spanish, or French native speaker, you have a really big disadvantage to some extent when it comes to the collaboration, because you might have brilliant idea, but you bring it on the local market and you don't know how to scale
Mm.
it up abroad, and you might have a really innovative idea, you might collaborate well in your local country, but then there is also missing the inclusivity, there is missing the expansion over the border. So what would you advise to the business leader who might be struggling with this?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think you can't have everything in the beginning because you just can't. You need to make the right kind of choices in some of the areas. I think look at collaboration or even diversity or inclusion in this kind of part. Yes, you can have it with hiring or with your team, but if you don't have that in the beginning, because actually you self fund, you do all of these things around it, you still have the product, and the product actually needs to be, when you have a product, most of the time you have the product, either it's a software or if it is a service or something, the product needs to be, of course, fitting to a diverse kind of environment around that. And that, of course, actually means you have to be open. Again, you have to have a growth mindset. You have to be open to feedback. You have to be open to talking to different kind of people around it. This is where your language comes in. Yes, different kind of people, different kind of backgrounds. People giving the feedback actually around that, because when you do that, the innovation actually comes automatically because you're not thinking about somebody. There was this great example, and I'm not sure if I can talk about it exactly, but they were having like makeup or so. And of course, they were only testing it on people actually in the environment around that. Then there was people actually coming who had darker skin, and they were providing a lot of very interesting feedback around that. And when they were actually being more inclusive, automatically, they were able actually to scale this to a very different way, because you can use that not only for your target audience, but actually for the way actually around that. So I think that the starting point is always, you need to find a way how you create collaboration, this inclusivity around that, and it doesn't have to start always with the team, but
Mm.
it has to start off with mindset. It has to start off, how can your product, your service, what you're creating, be as open as possible for the kind of areas what it actually helps. And then, of course, as you're growing, as you make decisions, the fourth, fifth hire, bring somebody in with a different kind of background around that.
Mm.
When you look at this is for me the important kind of aspect to do that.
Yeah, this is, I really like this because I had talk with one guy who is a founder of infrared therapy, and his co-founder is a man. He's also a man, and
Mhm.
they are co-founders, and they made infrared therapy, and they mainly did it for the sport purposes. That actually you put it on
Mhm.
the joints, and it
Yes.
is like penetrating really like deep into the skin. It's the best on the market, and it was like great device, But then, because of the feedback and because of the inclusivity of the company to expand over the borders, they actually got a feedback from women, which they didn't know that it's like helping, for example, with the period pain and with also like different symptoms that women can have, which the guys who are actually founders didn't know, and they even didn't think about like testing it in this direction.
Of course.
And then they received this feedback from their customers, and they started to invest then into inclusivity, into the studies how the
Hmm.
infrared therapy can help women with
Yes.
different symptoms, etc. And I found it a really interesting point that when you are then scaling and you have more resources, you have also more testimonials, more people are using your product. Either it can be physical or it also digital service, because I also had it, for example, with my services where I provided it to the couple. They came to me that they need branding help,
Hmm.
some advices, that they actually launched company in USA, and that they want to create a branding for their new company. They are working in a real estate, and we were working on their branding. And it actually ended up during our third session that they don't really need the branding as such, but they need a coaching how couples can actually do business together, because they struggled with, for example, time management. They were living together, they were working together, they were really like partners in crime and everything, but they didn't know how to do business together, how to set apart personal and professional life, how to, for
Hmm.
example, track the time and how to divide the tasks among each other, because she was, for example, responsible for social media and he did all of the manual work. So every time in the real estate, when they bought the house, he did everything like physically in the house, and he came home totally tired, and she was like 5 hours doing social media, and she was not tired physically, she was tired mentally.
Sure.
But they started to argue like who is more tired and like how he's doing all of the job, and she's just on the phone all the time and stuff like this. So then it ended up and also evolved an idea that I can do like a business course for example, couples. So like
Hmm.
how to divide the tasks among each other, how to actually collaborate together, and how to do this, because of the experience. Also, I see it with my parents. They are all their life they are living together and working together, so I know these tips and tricks on how to survive. But it's again the evolution, the feedback. The more you speak with people, the more you are open to have these conversations, and then apply it in your reality, that you learn the most from
Yes.
this authentic self.
It's interesting that you're going from branding into couple therapy.
Yes. Well, I'm not getting really in depth of like a therapy as such, but let's say that this is where I leave the table. Afterwards, they can deal with it together. I'm always saying I'm giving the people navigation, the structure and stuff, but the actual implementation, it's up to them. So if there would be some kind of tough situation, I would just pay the bill and I would leave slowly but surely.
A typical consultant.
Yes, exactly. But as you have like the physical services, then you also have digital services, and you
Yes.
need to cope with new situations and new, for example, testimonials that the people are interested in, the different services. So it's always evolving also with you. And this is what I like about branding, that you are actually the brand, and the brand is evolving
Yes.
with you based on the stages of your life where you currently are. uh, I want to also use the opportunity, as you are the investor, because I'm really curious about uh, three mistakes what the startups are usually doing when they are pitching to you, or when you are actually like scanning the different startups. What are the three common mistakes that startups are doing that you are always like, no, this is no.
Yeah, I think that there's not such a thing as like it's always the same, but clearly when I get a pitch deck who doesn't make sense, who doesn't where I don't understand that at all, where I have to ask 100 questions, normally that's a sign that they're not ready
Mm,
to actually pitch that to broader kind of people, but also have clarity for themselves actually why they're doing it, what they're doing. The other thing is when the experience of people don't fit with what they're trying to do. It makes me always very worried because if somebody who has only sold shoes, they're now trying to actually create a software company. I feel always a bit reluctant because they don't have the experiences actually around that.
mm,
And then maybe the third thing, and that actually happens very, very often, I have to say, is that they're completely overestimating the market and the market impact that they could have as of their company. That they're thinking like, oh wow, in 1 year or so, you're growing already 5,000%, and this is what's going to happen. Very often that actually means that the business acumen of people is not necessarily there around that. I think you have to have that balance. You have to have the right kind of passion, absolutely, for that. You need to bring that up, but you need to have um, that sense of reality as well, because otherwise this will not work.
mm. Yeah, I totally agree with this answer. Also, like when we spoke a lot about the leadership and how to be the leader, business leader with authentic collaboration. I have a question because I have myself like the idols or the leaders that I am looking up to. Do you also have some leader or leaders that you really are like, yes, these are the true leaders, like who I am really admiring, or like you take them as your icon or idol or something like this?
Yes. Yeah, I certainly do, but they're not necessarily the people like the the very big known kind of people. I have experienced people who are really good leaders. I was very lucky, and very often actually it's the same kind of things. It's people who are very supportive, who give you chances to drive things, who put you into situations where you feel yourself you're not ready, that you're not going to be successful, but they are supporting you to actually make you successful. Because by doing this and putting you into situations like that and making sure that you're not failing, but actually having the support around that, you're growing exponentially. And this, I could like tell you like two or three people in my life who have done that, and I am eternally grateful for them. And I try to do something similar, because if you have somebody as a cheerleader there who puts you into a situation, who helps you, who pushes you uphill, and actually is waiting to support you, nothing better than that.
Where this leader can be found, because I was not this lucky.
I was lucky. There's some people in IBM who were really, really, really good about that. Unfortunately, some people actually passed away in the meantime. But these are people actually I fondly remember, and I can always talk about that.
Nice. Yes, I was definitely not as lucky as you when it comes to leaders. I was, I was like even like at some point really like I had a critical, maybe I would say like unlucky lucky, because on the other hand, like I also like started to have the critical thinking about how it would be if I would have the cheerleader next to me, because I would maybe not then found my own company. I would maybe stay in the employment. I would be
Hmm.
really happy, and I would feel supported. But because I didn't have this feeling, this was why I was like migrating, and like I was always really closing myself into my own world after the work. And I was looking for like really to get my passions out there, to show my passions on the social media, etc. And this is how my brand started. So it's I would say both being lucky and unlucky, because like if you have this idol of a great leader that you really experienced it, you then really know how to lead as a leader, because you actually were in
Yes.
close contact with that person. But also if I was not, then yeah, my leader might be, for example, Elon Musk or Leila Ramosi, or these kind of folks who are like super popular, but I never spoke with them. I don't actually know how they are as leaders, because I was not part of their leadership. I just
Yes.
see what the news is selling me and giving me. So it might be also a bit I would say even like a misunderstanding who
Hmm.
leader exactly is. So like you, because I could just see who leader is from the textbook, from the news, from the cartoons, and these kind of things, which is really sad at the end.
But I do think there's you learn from good and from bad experiences. Sometimes you learn from bad experiences is even more, and I think looking at that and it's saying I want to be like that or I don't want to be like that has a lot of implications actually on you, and both can be great experiences. And actually, I would argue that if you would have a great leader, maybe they would have pushed you to go into being self-employed, creating your own company, because that's what they're seeing in you. I think good leader is not necessarily that they're pushing you in their direction, but they are open and
Mm.
they're trying actually to support you, what you can do around that. And I do think good and bad experiences actually can help overall around that. The good of one is of course a lot easier and a lot nicer, but both can.
Definitely. But what would you maybe advise to people who came across negative experience of a negative leader? Because then, uh, if they are in the situation, like being really currently like around a leader who is like suppressing them and be rather a boss than a leader, what would you advise them? I mean, we spoke about the choices that always people have a choice to, for example, quit from
Yes.
that environment. But is there also some other, for example, mindset tweaks that people, because if people are in that situation for some reason, like yeah, I need experiences, I just cannot find a job, I'm too young, there is not just a queue for me like of 30 other employers. So like is there some protection that the people can use to not get influenced? For example, we can speak about depressions and these kind of things.
Yes, I think it gets back to choices, absolutely. But I think it's a bit broader than that, right? Because you always have the choice to, ideally, you like what you do, you like the environment. Sometimes you need to, or you don't like. So that's the two very extreme kind of ones. But there's something in between, because of course there is your environment, and you need to decide for yourself: can you stand it? Can you stand it because of this? Can you stand it for some time? Can you do something in the meantime? I think there's lots of these kind of things in between liking and not liking. And of course, there's also something what you can try to do about that, because I've experienced in my life also leaders who were terrible, and they didn't know. And actually, when you go and actually have a conversation and just tell them and say, "Hey, look, this is how you make people feel. This is the situation. What it is." This is a very tough conversation, because you don't know if you're gonna go out and actually don't have a job anymore. But you need to see if you can have that risk. But my experience, not only once, but actually more than once, was actually that when you speak up and actually you provide that feedback, the person is not maybe thankful, but they are surprised. I had this one situation where this was really a very, very bad person who was very toxic, but he didn't know. He was trying to drive, he was trying to do things, and when he got that feedback, he actually got a coach and over time actually try to improve around that. It's not always the case. Sometimes you just get on somebody and who is toxic and they will actually be not there. So you need to make your choice actually if you want to have that conversation or not. But
Mm.
often speaking things up helps you, because even if it is a bully who is maybe not in the right one, when you speak up and when you talk against them, they have more respect for you than actually before that if you don't do anything around that. So it's really, there's so many different variations around that, but it is about you being conscious of what you're trying to do, thinking through the options what you have, and then actually picking the right what actually fits for you, because everybody is different, every leader is different, the situation is different. Everybody has to try to understand that. And of course, when you have conversations with people who can help you advise and coach you in this kind of things, that will make a better kind of call around that.
Yeah, I really like this. And I would just add to this that it's not about what you say at the end, it's about how you say it. You can
Mm.
just tell them that they are, for example, not good in something, that they probably like are suppressing you. But don't tell it literally like this. Just like think about it for a few days. Maybe use ChatGPT in some more professional ways, how you can convey the message without offending them, for example. So this might be also that it's not about like what you say as like literally, but how you say
Yes,
it. Always you can say it more professionally. You don't need to scream at each other when you will go to the person office.
that's exactly right.
All right, Horst, do you have something that you would like to say at the end of this episode? Something that we didn't mention, that you would like to highlight more, that we didn't, for example, have time to touch upon this topic, or something like this?
Well, there's so many different things, but I think, especially today, in today's world, change is the only constant. So, of course, actually having that right kind of mindset, what we were talking about, questioning about the things, what you can influence, what you can't, but actually providing that a common kind of part is, for me, one of the most important things. And of course, it always starts with growth mindset. If you think that there's something what you can't influence, it makes it very complicated. But if you actually think that you have an influence on many of the things around that and you can do proactively take some of the steps around that, it makes it so much easier for yourself because you're not bound by something what is happening to you, but you can actually make it yourself. I think that is for me one of the most important things.
Yes, that's amazing closure. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Your Brand, Your Business. Thank you again, Horst, for sharing your insight with us. And also to you, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. I'm Marie, and I will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye bye, everyone.